Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Procrastinator's Pit Stop. Today, we're featuring a special guest with deep expertise in ADHD coaching and neurodivergence, Shane Thrap. As an expert on ADHD and founder of Creating Order from Chaos, which is a coaching and consulting business, they are dedicated to empowering individuals with ADHD to discover their purpose and conquer their goals. In addition to coaching, they consult with businesses to foster understanding of neurodivergent and implement effective accommodations. They also serve as the operations director for the nonprofit Men's ADHD Support Group and sit on the board of Dueling Minds, an organization supporting those with a dual diagnosis of autism and ADHD. Through these roles, they passionately advocate for ADHD awareness while working with a team of speakers covering topics in culture, education, parenting, and mental health. Shane, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
It's no trouble at all. Now, before we dig into it, we do like to have an icebreaker on the show, and your question is, which cartoon character do you most identify with, and why?
Ironically enough, if I had thought about this as a kid as to why I like this character, it probably would have made things make a lot more sense as I got older. It's always been the Incredible Hulk. Always been that the dichotomy between, Bruce Banner, the hyper intellectual, and the Hulk itself as this raging monster. And like as I look back, I go, oh, that makes a lot of sense considering I have both ADHD and autism.
Okay.
Now, I never made the leap right there to to make this giant spiritual awakening kind of leap when I was younger. It wasn't until like in my older years that I started going, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's an interesting one there because immediately you would probably think Incredible Hulk, big strong guy, gets angry and he can beat up anybody who makes him mad, but it went deeper for you.
Yeah, it did. It was the intellectual side. It was in knowing that my intellect was different than other people's. And right, Bruce Banner's like biggest journey and hurdles is finding a place where he can belong, where the people around him understand him well enough to know not to do things that would make him angry and just leave him in the peace to be able to focus on the things that he enjoyed doing, which was largely helping the world. To the point that even the Hulk, even in all of his different iterations, is for the most part force for good. Now, of course, there's the spin-offs and the different universes and different things like that, where we have world, Buster Hulk and stuff like that. But at the same time, the thought process was primarily the Hulk is a force for good to protect the innocent. And that just resonated with me. Whereas Bruce Banner was a force for good, trying to better humanity as a whole to empower them. And, it just kind of resonates across almost every aspect of my life.
That is, I have to admit that is probably the deepest that we've ever gone with that question on this show. But that's an awesome insight, and I think we're going to try to dig more in the future on that. Before we continue on in today's discussion, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey and how you got to be where you are today?
I'm a father of four. I've got a 21-year-old who literally just shipped off to the Navy a couple days ago, which I'm super proud about that. My oldest daughter is heading off in the Navy in the next couple of months, so they made a joint decision to do that, which I'm super stoked about that. I'm a father of 5-year-old twins with my current wife, and the way that I got here was just through both the biggest comedy and biggest tragedy that I know of anybody's story who I've talked to. I grew up in the South where, you know, the nearest Walmart was 75 miles away, which in the South is a unit of measurement. That's how you know you're super country, is like how far you are from a Walmart. And it was really weird for me because I was always different. I wasn't really big into hunting, even though I was a good hunter. I wasn't really ever big into doing a lot of things like mechanics or logging or anything like that, even though I was really good at those things. And my dad was all of those things. He was always a hunter. He was, his work had him in the woods all the time. My uncle ran a sawmill. My dad ran logs to him constantly. Of course, I got into that. My dad got into mechanics, and looking back, I'm like, oh, my dad's definitely ADHD. And, it's hilarious when I think about all of the knowledge that I have now and looking back on my childhood, I can sit here and point at all these little instances where this should have gotten caught, but it didn't. And that feeling like I was always on the outside looking in was just something that was very pervasive. I was really good at school too. I was hyperlexic. My dad got me for my birthday. This is the greatest birthday gift of like all time for me. Well, it's like I was 7 years old and he got me an entire Encyclopedia Britannica because I kept asking why. And he got sick and tired of answering me why. And he would just always like, go read that book, just like find that letter. And then of course I'd hyper focus on that thing. And all the signs were there, but because of the lack of understanding and the lack of knowledge, they just didn't know what to do with me. And this continued all the way through school. And then in my 20s, I did the ADHD thing. I really bounced from job to job and relationship to relationship. I was dealing with addiction. I was homeless a number of times. I was just kind of a leaf that was blowing on the wind. I would go wherever I wanted to go. I would live where I wanted to live. I definitely squatted in a number of different empty houses, just because, I needed somewhere. And it was always a struggle. And then as I got older and older and I got into a relationship with a really abusive woman who just really capitalized on all of my issues and really isolated me. And my first two children are from her. And then when we split up, that was a really big, nasty thing. And then fast forward a few years, I went into this whole deep dive of trying to understand who I was. And I still, by the way, at this point, I had no clue if I had ADHD or autism. I did not know about these things. And it wasn't until after I met my new wife and I started really digging into my mental health and gaining a better understanding of what that meant because of my oldest son's diagnosis with ADHD that I started really finding those things. But it took me forever to get diagnosed. First, therapist, sat here and said adults don't have ADHD. It's probably depression. Went to a psychiatrist. She agreed with my therapist. Adults don't have ADHD. Went to talk to a number of different other professionals, and they were trying to figure out if it was bipolar disorder or any of these things. But by this time, I had done so much of my own research that I had really started to get a better understanding of ADHD. And I finally walked into a clinic and I said, I want to be tested for ADHD. I don't want to be tested for anything else. I want you to test me for ADHD. And they did. They listened to me and had very high up on the scale for ADHD. But the pain didn't stop there. It was still a struggle. Because they started me on medication, and this clinic was really good. They also really emphasized the importance of therapy, which a lot of clinics don't do, which is absolutely important. And the more that I was working with the therapist, the more the therapist started going, all right, why is the medication not helping? We've got to talk to your doctor about this because you're taking a medication, you're doing your medicine logs, you're turning them in, you're doing all of the right things, but your anxiety is getting worse. Your social anxiety is getting worse. And I struggled with that. And finally they sat down and said, let's just play with something real quick. And we started going through a test. And I didn't know what it was about. And as we were going through the test, it was very much a wake up call for me because I started recognizing some of the questions that she was asking me. And when we got done, she goes, I think the problem that we're dealing with is that we assumed that you just had ADHD. But what I'm really looking at here is a large number of autism spectrum issues as well. There's some traits here that are very specific to autism that you're dealing with. And that means that we have to treat this in a completely different way. And this is when I started really learning about why an accurate diagnosis was so important. Is there are certain medications that you can give to somebody with ADHD that will harm them if they also have autism. They can make social anxiety worse. Wellbutrin prime example can call suicidal ideation. And I dealt with suicidal ideation. And when I started really deciding to make a big change in my life after I had to retire from the corporate world in 2018, I needed to understand what to do with myself. And I didn't want people having to go through the same struggles that I did. And this activated this social justice thing in my head. How can I do that? Well, I don't want to go back to college for therapy, you know. And that's when, I decided to kind of combine my loves. I love project management. Why don't I work with people to develop their businesses or whatever? And then that kind of turned into, well, why don't I also make sure I understand coaching? Like, how do I coach people to be more effective in what they're doing? And so I started getting certifications in life coaching and eventually ADHD life coaching. And then that kind of morphed into this business that has wide range of things I can do. So there's the baseline of project management. There's the baseline of entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship management and coaching. But there's also the fact that I can do website design, branding design, social media management, all these different things. And so now, after a few years, it's this one-stop shop for entrepreneurs to go to who have ADHD to really either flesh out their business ideas or to expand on their business and figure out why they're struggling or they've hit that plateau, or if they're just trying to make sure that they are working with their employees who have ADHD or autism and give them the tools that they need, as well as the consulting business I do for other companies that are trying to do much the same.
That's it's a really great background and a really great journey you've been on, and thanks so much for sharing that. One of the things that you mentioned there about, diagnosis being so crucial, but one of the thoughts I had is that there's still such a stigma, just ADHD or even autism in general. Do you think that contributes to not getting diagnosed?
Massively, massively. The stigma comes from ignorance, as all stigmas do. You know what I mean? But the stigma doesn't come from just your regular Joe. It's in doctors. It's in primary care physicians. It's in psychiatrists. It's in therapists. It's pervasive across our society because there's so much out there for people to understand about ADHD in the scientific world. It's one of the most studied children's issues out there. However, that knowledge hasn't made it from research papers into our medical schools or into schools that are teaching therapy and things like that. They barely cover it. And that's only if the person is going in there for some sort of pediatric degree. And that's the crime, right? That's why I do what I do, is we have to make sure that the doctors who are going to be the first point of contact are primary care physicians, psychiatrists, psychologists, therapists. These people need to be fully informed on ADHD, autism in adults, because so many people of our generation have been lost because they didn't know. And it may have been discovered when they were kids, but because their doctors probably thought it was a child disorder, they thought they grew out of it. But they don't. It's a lifelong thing that we deal with.
So I actually wanted to ask you, it was on my docket to ask you about this actually, because there are a lot of us that we get distracted very easily. We get dragged into social media, we get dragged into different things. I've actually gone through this, with my own daughter, right? Like, and it gets to the point too where it's almost like, in a kind of avoidance almost, because, no, again, it's information surrounding it, right? But do you think that it is that, maybe, and how do you define, like, how do you get the difference, or when should somebody maybe look at getting the other test if they find they're getting distracted quite a bit by social media, because it's designed to be distracting? So, a lot of us are distracted with it. But when do you think it's time to maybe go and get that test and know for sure?
when you're 3 or 4 or 5. Here's the thing: ADHD and autism are often missed in children because people do not recognize or realize the how many children or how many you know of our youth have it, and they don't bother getting children tested because they don't think that their child may have it. And the problem with that mindset is the ignorance of neurodiversity. Here's the thing about ADHD and autism and neurotypical brains. It's all a part of the tapestry that is the human brain. People with ADHD and autism aren't broken neurotypicals. Their processing is different. Their experience of the world is different. They see things and hear things and deal with things in a different way, but they're not broken, right? The reason why social media may be super interesting for people with ADHD is because we process information faster, and social media feeds you information faster. It's faster than what we can learn in the school. It's faster than what our parents can teach us. It's information that's being dumped into our brains at a rate that we can keep up with. And it's hyper focused, obviously, through the algorithms to give us the information that we want when we want it. So we have to understand that a large number of these signs that people are dealing with, ADHD or autism or something like that, is not necessarily the social media. It is the hyperfixation and the hyper focuses. And these things need to be recognized at an earlier age so that you're able to empower the child to be able to find the dopamine that they need, or to be able to find the social expression that they need, or the language that they need to speak, or the communication preferences that they need, or the learning methodologies that work best for them, and then curate the content that they're putting into themselves in a way that makes sense for them. So if your child likes a lot of social media, make sure the social media that they're looking at has a lot more fact-based systems in it. Encourage it and watch it with them, right, as so that they're learning. So my children watch YouTube constantly. I let them watch YouTube constantly because the content that they're watching is all educational, and it's at the educational level that they enjoy, right? And I don't care that it's them watching YouTube because I'm right there with them. They're not watching a lot of stuff that's just extraneous BS. Yeah, they do. They watch Spider-Man and all that stuff, and they watch all the Disney stuff whenever they want. But most of the time when they're watching YouTube, my son watches one video that's like an hour and a half long that breaks down all the stars that we know of in the system, but it's sung to a children's melody, and it's a really well done breakdown of all these different stars, all of the planets. Like, my son talks to Alexa constantly because he wants to know what the weather is like in this part of the country or this part of the world. It's about curating the content so that they're taking in fact-based information that makes sense for them, because that's how they're going to retain the information and move forward. If your kid likes to play a lot of video games, guess what? One of the number one ways to help treat ADHD is playing video games through and using them for therapy. Play therapy is a huge aspect of ADHD and autism. How do we incorporate that into something that they enjoy? Make sure that you're curating video games that they enjoy that really emphasize education and other things like that, and aren't just like mindless button mashers. Like, give them the agency to choose and pick and find those things that really work with them, then just tweak it a little bit so that what they're taking in from those ways is educational.
Yeah. So you've hit on some really interesting nerve points, actually.
Also, there's a number of people in your audience right now who are losing their snot at me right now. I'm just going to sit here and put that out there. Like, I get that that's really against the grain and you don't think you want your kids doing that. The thing is, everything I just said is according to the most recent science that we have about this stuff. You can argue with me, and I'm totally fine with that, but I'll sit here and also point out all the research that we have about this stuff. So there's a number of people just called me arrogant as shit too.
Yeah, well,
Sorry.
yeah, well, I mean, but and again, I did want to touch on that just a little bit because, as a parent, and it's one of the reasons that I asked too, because I know that there are lots of parents that have the same question, and the biggest struggle that we have one of the biggest struggles that we have as parents right now is, getting them off the damn phone, or not going on Facebook or social media. But at the same time, you know, we're also not immediately saying, oh well, maybe we should, get them tested for ADHD. And here's sort of the big question for you on that aspect. If all we're doing is, punishing the child or taking the phone away or cutting out their hours and not, maybe even, again, it's an uncomfortable subject, right? So people tend to avoid it. But if we're doing that, I mean, are we causing more harm than the supposed good we're causing of getting them off the social media?
So social media is problematic. Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, all of those. When we are talking about social media, we need to make sure that we are paying attention to what our kids are into. Most children are into Instagram Reels, TikTok, stuff like that. We need to curate their subject matter there. That means work on our part to be involved in it with them, right? We don't want them mindlessly surfing through things. We want them following interests that align with what they want to learn, right? And we need to then pay attention to that, because you can't just tell your child get off their phone without giving them something to do, right? So you can't ask your child to just not be on the phone and then them just stare at a wall. They need to have things to do. So if you're wanting your child to get off social media and go, do, the dishes or things like that, then you need to be doing it with them. The thing about it is the biggest struggle that a lot of people have is like, I just want my child to go wash dishes. All right. Do they know how you want them to wash dishes? Like, have you shown them? Like, do you do it with them? Or are you on your phone or your computer or your PlayStation or whatever while you're wanting them to go do those things, right? Do you want your children to go exercise, or you want them to go outside and play? Are you outside with them? Are you outside playing with them? Are you spending time outside on your own? We have to model the behaviors that we want so that they learn them. And that's how they learn. They see mom and dad on their phones all the time, then they're going to be on their phones all the time. Now, you're either going to make sure that they are on doing the things that they want to do, that you want them to do, or they're going to do what they want to do on them. If you want your children to read more, then they need to be seeing you reading more. If you want your children to do their homework more, then you need to be doing the homework with them, or your own work with them while they're doing their homework. Not all parents can do this, and I totally understand it, right? Y'all are tired, y'all are exhausted from work and everything like that. But the thing is your children are going to do whatever you do. And you can't tell your child not to do something while you're doing it. And so you can do a few things. You can model the behavior that you want. You can celebrate the behaviors when they do them the right way, even if it's not your way, but they do it to the best of their ability. And you can curate what they're watching and looking at, or you can watch your child just do whatever the fuck they want. Sorry, language. Apologize. Because that's your options. And when you take away things from them because you don't want them doing them, but you're still doing those things yourself, you've taken away your child's agency and then shown them that you're a hypocrite. Like, they don't care that you went to work all day. They don't care because they went to school all day, and that's their work. That's what they're supposed to do. And so if you come home and you just immediately relax and take off all your clothes and get your pajamas on and you start vegging out, well, that's what your kids are going to expect to be able to do. But if as soon as your children get home and they want to relax, but you're haranguing them about doing their homework, or you have them doing a bunch of chores and you have them doing all this stuff, and yet you're sitting off to the side relaxing after work. Resentment's going to build up. Defiance is going to build up. They don't have agency. So you have to give your children the agency. Sometimes children come home and they need to do their homework as soon as they get home, so that they're kind of riding that work, or from school to home. They're still in that mindset. Sometimes some children need to relax and decompress and then do their homework. Sometimes there's a combination of the two. Sometimes they need to be spending time outside as soon as they get home, because they've been cooped up in a classroom for 8 hours, because our schools have lost their damn minds about having a recess at a regular time for K through 12, not just kindergarten. All ages need to have outside time, But the thing is people need to understand that the children are going to do what you do. And if all you do is yell and scream at them to do their chores while you're vegging out after work because you needed time to decompress and relax, because you do, then you're being a hypocrite in their eyes. Why should I listen to you? Because you don't do what you're telling me to do. And even if they don't know how to express that or communicate that, their behaviors are going to express and communicate that. They're going to get mad and frustrated because you want them to do these things, but they don't see you doing it. Especially when they start to sit here and start recognizing fairness and unfairness, right? So it's all about modeling you the behavior that you want to see.
Yeah, that's some very good insights there. And it's true, and I know the kids have a very black and white way of seeing things as well, so we need to be careful of that.
Especially
Just
neurodivergent children, because that's literally how our brains work. Everything is white and black.
and just going back into that, the black and white aspects of things. What would you say is the biggest challenge for someone with ADHD in making a business, and how do you approach that?
Emotional dysregulation. Emotional dysregulation is literally the basis for almost everything with ADHD and autism, because you get super excited about this idea that we have, right? It's this brilliant idea, and actually often it is extremely brilliant idea, right? It hits a niche that a lot of people don't hit. It solves a problem that a lot of people didn't know how to solve. It addresses issues or recognizes issues that people have been struggling with but didn't know how to communicate, because our brains are natural problem solvers and we recognize things slightly differently. And so when we come up with these brilliant ideas, for us, it's as simple as child's play. But we get it super hyper focused into that thing, and we sit here and we start working on the thing immediately, and we start building all the different stuff, and then we get bored. And we recognize that there's some things that are hard. I just want to paint. Prime example, I just want to paint. That's all I want to do. But I got to make a living, so I need to be able to sell this painting. Well, where do I sell it at? All right. Well, I mean, like, who do I sell? Okay, well, we got to talk to an agent, and we got to make sure that you have an LLC, and we got to make sure that you have your taxation stuff set in place. We have to make sure that you are talking to clients and selling your artwork and talking to curators and getting your art in a museum, or you have to get featured on these websites. You have to get featured on social media. You have to get blown up on TikTok. And all they want to do is paint, right? And so a lot of people get stuck in that minutia of all the administrative stuff that they want, that is what is the infrastructure of the business that they want to have, but they don't want to do. And then they get discouraged. And so then they keep trying to do the painting because they love it, and then they start getting burnt out, and then they hate painting. It's almost constantly a cycle like that I see so often in a lot of the clients that I work with. They have this brilliant idea. They have that. They want to market it. They want to build it up. They want to create everything. But the thing is there's only like a very small aspect of the business that they actually enjoy doing. Usually around the creativity, the creation, the development, the innovation, the changing, the dynamic stuff that's in there. It's very rarely the administrative stuff, the infrastructure stuff. And that's the biggest struggle. And it's one of the biggest things that I have to work with my clients is recognizing where their strengths are, where their most, you know, interesting part of the business is for them, and then how to delegate and get rid of the other stuff and give it to other people who can do it for them so that they can become successful doing the things that they enjoy. Like a lot of coaches out there, they love the coaching, and I love it too. They hate having to put social media content out there. They hate having to build an email list. They loathe like finances and the administrative work and making sure that I'm responding to emails, all these things. They hate those things. And this is where a lot of people like me come into play, or virtual assistants come into play. You know, one of the roles that I play a lot of times is as a business manager effectively. And I run like the day-to-day stuff where they focus on talking to the clients, working with the clients, and solving the clients' problems. You know, that's kind of where I see the biggest struggle is understanding and recognizing when to let some of that stuff go and let other people do it, but doing it in a way that it falls within your bottom line, and that you're charging enough money for those things to be able to afford a person who does that stuff for you. Too often they try to take it all on themselves and try to do everything themselves when they're not constructed to do it that way. Their brains don't work that way.
Well, I mean, we could say that in general, but just the disconnect between what you actually want to do and kind of what you need to do in business is that's a pretty big subject for everyone. But I imagine also for the ADHD, it becomes a main focal point and like a driver to the frustration, right?
And that's why I said at the beginning, emotional dysregulation is the biggest part of it, right? Because we feel things more. This isn't just mean like, excitement and stuff like that, but frustration and stress and burnout. And like when we start to feel overwhelmed, we feel significantly more overwhelmed. We feel things more and we feel them faster, and we develop trauma faster. And when we start getting frustrated because we're not good at a certain aspect of the business, we don't have the self-awareness to apply the nuance that it's this part of the business I don't like. We apply it to everything to do with that business. So, like, prime example, me, I hate bookkeeping. I loathe it. I can't stand bookkeeping. That's what would lock me up from doing any work on a certain day, because I knew that I needed to do my bookkeeping and that had to be a chore that I needed to do for that day. But that would lock me up and make me procrastinate on everything because I knew I had to do that thing. And that made me start loving what I do. What we have to start understanding is we need to make sure that we are focusing on the things that we are good at, because that's how we reduce our emotional stress and frustration, right? We have to focus on the parts of the business that we enjoy doing so that we don't get burned out and overwhelmed so easily. And we have to understand that as people with ADHD and autism, we can burn out and get frustrated easier, especially if we haven't done any work with a therapist or any work with a psychiatrist or found any medications that work for us or anything like that. And especially if we're untreated and untherapied, and again, you have to recognize that a lot of the things that we're going to need are external supports. And that means having in place tool sets. That means having in place virtual assistants or personal assistants or business managers or coaches, things like that, who help us move through those things and develop the system overall that allows us to function within where we need to function at. And we can learn things along the ways, right? I'm actually good at bookkeeping. Even though I don't like it, I know enough about it to be able to communicate it effectively with my CPA. I'm good at website design. really good at website design. I design multiple websites for multiple different companies. I don't necessarily enjoy it, but I know enough about it to be able to communicate it effectively with a team who can develop my website. And I can make tweaks and I can make little changes to it here and there as I want to as I go forward, right? I know about brand design. I love brand design. I know logo design. I don't do logo design. I do branding design. Difference. But I have a team who does logo design for me. And I know enough that I can sit here and go back into it and tweak it and make it, what I want in, as a finished product. And that's kind of how we have to understand. I know what my strengths are. I also know what my weaknesses are. And we have to value those weaknesses just as much as we do our strengths, because the weaknesses are who we hire to do those things for us. That's how we determine that. And we can't run a business without support like that. No corporate CEO in the world, no solopreneur in the world, no entrepreneur in the world has ever created something amazing all on their own. Not a single one of them have. Even though they'll sit here and say, I'm a self-made millionaire. BS. You had a personal assistant, a virtual assistant, a manager, you had a CPA, you had people who were helping you along the way is what made that thing great. It's in every story that's out there. But all these gurus that are out there who sit here and talk about that they're a self-made millionaire, they don't tell you those parts. They ignore those parts.
Some very good insight. And it's true. No man is an island, and we need, well, as the saying, not to try and be offensive. Okay, no person is an island. There we go. We'll fix it. So, you do need to recognize your limits, and you need to recognize to go on there. So you said something interesting there for procrastination in terms of ADHD and neurodivergent individuals. In terms of procrastination, I mean, is that kind of the way to get around it? Is that so? How would you recommend somebody who's going through procrastination with ADHD approach something if they have to do it themselves and they aren't able to delegate?
First off, you need to figure out why you're procrastinating, because it's most often not the entire thing that you're procrastinating. There's almost always a small aspect of it that you just don't like doing. I'll use an example. One of my jobs as a stay-at-home father is to do the laundry. And one of the things that I started noticing was I would start dreading doing laundry. But I didn't understand why. All I had to do was just go drop the laundry in the washer, put it, transfer it into the dryer, take it in there and sort all of it, and then fold it and then put it up. So I started paying attention to myself when I'm doing it. And I started paying attention to when I started getting frustrated. And a very interesting thing came on. I'd put my headphones on, right? I'd be listening to my audiobook. I'd go put it in the washer. I'd set my timer because we need external tools, right? I don't want to forget about that. So, hey, Alexa, set a timer for 45 minutes to check on the laundry. External tools. I have to make this as easy as possible. All right, Alexa goes off. I go in there, grab my headphones, put them in the dryer, so forth and so on. Alexa, set a timer for 60 minutes to check on a dryer. Boom. External tools. We have to make things as easy as possible. Part of procrastination is because the job gets too hard and we don't like doing that. This is what I mean about making sure that we have external tools and systems in place. And then it would come to taking the laundry out of the dryer and sorting it. Cool. Headphones in, listening to an audiobook, sort. And then the stop. I got to put all this away, and it's just a mountain of clothing that's sorted. Oh, I got to go do that thing. And I'm in the kitchen, or I'm doing literally anything else. Literally anything else instead of folding and putting the laundry away. I hear a noise. I'm going to go check out that noise. Anything. My book stops. Oh, crap. I've got to search through Audible and find a new book to read. Oh, that's a new title. Oh, that's a cool title. Oh, I need to find out more about that. Facebook. Research. But oh, there's a video about that. Videos. 3.5 hours later. There's where you figure that stuff out. What stops you and what makes it so easy for you to walk away from the thing that you're trying to do? At what point does that happen? There's the point of pain. This is how I discovered I hate folding clothes. I loathe it. I hate folding clothes. So I talked to my wife. I said, hey, sweetie, look, I'll make a deal with you. I will wash, I will dry, I will sort all the laundry. No questions asked, no problem. Can you fold it and put it away? Sure. Can you make sure dishes are done every night? Bet. Right? So that's a transfer of work. Now, let's talk about if we don't have that choice. Well, there's a couple of different things here you can do. You can either suck it up and do it. There's not really a choice there, right? It needs to get done. Or you can be okay with your clothes just essentially being a pile somewhere that you sort through and pick out what you want. I don't fold my clothes, right? Even when I have to do it myself, my clothes get like rolled up and then put into a thing, into a dresser. I don't sort them. I don't hang any of my clothes. I'm okay with how my clothes look if I pull them out, right? Most of the time they're not wrinkly or anything like that. I don't have any clothes that would get wrinkly because I bought my clothes to be, me proof. So you have to find the workarounds that you're okay with accepting that has you taking care of those little aspects of the one thing that you don't like about the overall thing, right? If you can trade that with somebody else, then cool. But you can also do things like body doubling, right? Body doubling on sites like focus.com or, working with different groups or having your friend come over. That distraction of having somebody else who's got an expectation of you getting the thing done, you can body double with them, and work your way through it. It's about understanding that we need a certain level of a toolbox, a number of tools in a toolbox that we can use to get through things, and finding an acceptance of how much work we're willing to do when we hit that point of the thing that we can't stand doing. And if that means that your acceptance means that you don't fold all your laundry, but you put it into a place where you can see and easily pull it out regardless of how it looks, okay, cool. You're a grown-ass adult. Nobody gets to judge you for that stuff. If that's the best you can do, if that's the most spoons that you have, you're a grown adult. You get to do those things. At what level are you going to be okay with it? Because you have to understand that a lot of things that people need to understand about ADHD and autism is acceptance of how our brains work. There are going to be things in our lives that we can't stand doing, and our brains do not function the same way as a neurotypical person. A neurotypical person sits there and says, importance-based mindset, right? Importance-based. My wife thinks this is important. My boss thinks this is important. I think this is important. My kids think this is important. So therefore it is important. We don't have the same mindset. We have an interest-based mindset. What I find interesting is what I want to do. And we can learn. My wife thinks that this is important, so I'm going to figure out how I can make this interesting enough so I can do it. My boss thinks this is important, so therefore I need to figure out the ways to make it interesting for me to do this thing that they feel is important. See the adjustment that we have to make constantly? We have to understand and accept that our brains are interest-based. That means that instead of worrying about the importance of things, we need to figure out how to make the thing that is important to somebody interesting for us. And that takes time. That takes coaching. That takes working with a psychiatrist and a therapist and having medication and working through your traumas and a lot of coaching to get your brain around that meat so that you're able to do those things. For our children, guess what? It's a lot of time. It's a lot of working with therapists. It's a lot of working with not just for the child to have a therapist, but for you as an adult to have a therapist. Because if you don't have ADHD and you're a neurotypical, you have to learn how your child functions. If you're an adult with ADHD and your children who have ADHD, high likelihood, by the way, hereditary issues, then you got to figure out how their ADHD brain works and how your ADHD brain works and how you can meet in the middle somewhere. But everything is about learning these systems. And the best way that we can empower our children is by empowering ourselves with the knowledge. And again, this goes back way back to what I said earlier. This is why a lot of parents out there, especially if they have ADHD or autism themselves, or if it's a thing that's in their family, need to be getting their children tested as early as possible, simply to rule it out. If their children are neurotypical, great. But if your children also have ADHD or autism or both, it's still great because you know, and now you can work. And then your children don't have to deal with all this stuff as they get older because you're going to build systems for them and with them. And along the way, you're going to build systems for yourself as well. That was a really long-winded answer to your question, and I'm sorry.
No, it was very it was very enlightening, and I definitely appreciate all the insights that you have, and I'm sure that our listeners appreciate it as well. That being said, we are coming up on time pretty soon. Do you think that there was anything that I should have asked that I didn't ask, or anything that maybe we should have covered that we didn't cover?
No, I think I covered quite a bit. You got me on a couple of different rants there, and I do apologize. I think what a lot of people need to really understand is that, and I said this a little bit in there, like, we need to understand that people with ADHD and autistic people are not broken neurotypical people. They just think slightly different, right? They have different needs that need to be met. And a lot of that work as adults needs to be working with psychiatrists and therapists and professionals to get the accurate diagnosis and the accurate treatment that you need. Not because you're broken, but because your brain works slightly differently. And there are things out there that help us. Emotional dysregulation is a huge component of both ADHD and autism. We may need medication that helps us not deal with those emotions as much. And we need therapy to be able to understand and recognize emotions and work through them in effective ways. We have to learn how to communicate effectively with other people around us who may be neurotypical. Neurotypical people need to have therapy so they can understand how to talk to us and not use, innuendo and make us try to guess what they want. There's a big, huge thing happening in the neurodivergent world right now where we think neurotypical people are broken because they cannot communicate effectively with us at all. Everything is about guesswork. And I'm not making this a sexist thing. Neurotypical people do this. I know a lot of guys are out there going yeah, I wish my wife wouldn't do that. I did not say that. I just heard y'all in my head. I'm just saying. We can't guess. We can't read people's minds. People need to communicate effectively overall. And I think that's the biggest key. Learn how to communicate effectively with everybody around you so that you are having the ability to ask for help when you need help. And look, it's okay to ask for help. All you men out there who are rolling your eyes at me, it is okay to ask for help. You're not Superman. And I need everybody to also point out Superman did ask a lot of people for help. Just going to point that out there, but I think the biggest thing is just making sure that people understand that you're not broken neurotypicals, that you have a brain that works slightly different and there's nothing wrong.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for that. And, we really appreciate you being on the show. Definitely a lot of great insights, a lot of good information. Before we wrap things up, what is the best way for our listeners to get in touch with you, Shane?
You can find me on my website, creatingorderfromchaos.com or mensadhdsupportgroup.org. Either one. You can also follow me on all of the social medias at both of those locations.
Excellent. And for all our listeners, don't worry, we'll be putting that in the show description, so you'll have an easy way to get in touch with Shane here. And once again, Shane, thank you so much for being on the show. And to all our listeners, thank you for tuning in. And just remember, if you can't find your inspiration or motivation today, try and be that motivation or inspiration for someone else. And we'll see you again next time.